Cast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good evening, everyone. This is Penny Wyatt, Director of Parent Programs and External Relations for the Division of Student Affairs. Welcome to our Commencement Preparation Parent Webinar. I'm going to go over a couple of details just so that you know how we'll proceed, and then I'll introduce our panelists. So first of all, I just want to let you know that this is the volume for the webinar. You can adjust that on your side. And just so that I can check to make sure that everything's working correctly, if you will look on your dashboard, on your control panel, and raise your hand if you can hear. So I see some hands going up, so that's good. So just keep in mind that you'll be able to adjust the volume if you need to on your side. So thank you for doing that. I'd also like to just make sure you can see the screen. So raise your hand if you can see the screen. Good. Okay. So you will have an opportunity to submit questions at the end of the webinar, and we'll cue you when it's time to do that. But we'll ask that you wait to write in anything until we get to that point. We have tried very hard to anticipate your questions and make this very thorough. And we have reviewed the last couple of years of questions to make sure that we capture information that wasn't presented in the past. So we've really tried to corral a lot of this information to provide for you. It's very important to me, after working with all of you parents for 4 years, that we make your this visit, which might be your last visit to campus, as welcoming as other visits that you've had. And we really want you to have an enjoyable time celebrating your students' accomplishments. And we certainly know that this can be kind of a complicated visit, that you may have multiple family members and multiple generations of family members and other guests, and you're trying to coordinate a lot of different things logistically. So we want to try to walk you through that so that you understand everything. Tulane's commencement is a sight to behold, and it's like so many other things. It's very much a spectacle, and we want you to enjoy every bit of that. So we want to guide you through all of that. This whole PDF of all the webinar slides will be posted on the Parent Programs website, and the link to the video will also be posted there. But all of you who registered and are participating live tonight will also get a follow-up email from me by Thursday afternoon or Friday morning with that link and PDF, so that you can review this again. So you don't need to worry too much about taking notes while you're listening tonight. So I'd also just ask, if you have feedback for us, if you'll email parents at tulane.edu. That's really helpful. Every year we try to refine the webinars and other kinds of publications and other offerings to parents. And so the things that you appreciate may be something that a parent a couple of years ago suggested. So we really value your feedback. The other thing I want to just mention about the slides here is that they are pretty dense. There's a lot of content on the slides, and we do that. It's a little bit different than if you were seeing a PowerPoint presentation, if we were there in person with you, but so many people like to just breeze through the slides to get the information later, that we do have a lot of detail on the slides. So just want to state that up front. So I think that we will get started. I would like to ask one more question. I have a feeling from some things I've heard from people that sometimes we have parents whose students are not graduating this year, but they just want to get a head start on understanding what will happen, and they join the webinar. So please raise your hand if you have a student who's currently a first-year sophomore or junior, and you're just way ahead of things. Okay, maybe not so much tonight. Oh, a couple, I see you. So you're welcome to listen. There are a lot of things that are very traditional about this that we will maintain from year to year, but I would say it's very important for you to make sure that you at least review the slides in future years and pay close attention to the schedule in case the order of things should change. So thank you. We're going to go ahead and get started. So I want to introduce the panelists. So Ariana Gamble is from Communications and Marketing. Valerie Robinson is our events consultant. Kate Simon unfortunately cannot be here this evening, so I'm going to review her slides. And again, I'm Penny Wyatt from Parent Programs within the Division of Student Affairs. So we're going to get started and just show you, this is the topic outline. So we're going to give an overview. We're going to talk about Grad Fest, which is a preparation program for students. We're going to provide some information about lodging and rental car resources. We're going to go through the weekend's events. And then we'll also talk about the details that your student would need to pay attention to if they live on campus and they need to wrap up on campus. And then we'll also review some of the resources for new graduates that are provided by the Tulane Alumni Association and our Alumni Affairs Department on campus. Now, this webinar will focus on the undergraduate school graduation ceremonies. The graduate students and professional schools have their own graduation events, but they are also included in the University Commencement Ceremony. But my resources for parents are really directed at the undergraduate students. So you can find more detail about those particular events on the commencement.tulane.edu schedule. So without further ado, we're just going to jump right in. So it's really important to kind of understand that this is a multi-day event. There are some really special parts of it. For students here on campus, there is an event called Grad Fest, which is a 2-day kind of thing to help them get all of their ducks in a row. And the nice thing about Grad Fest is that they can do everything here on campus in just a matter of minutes, really, and they can go to one location on campus to take care of everything. And then in May, the Wave Goodbye program is, that party is on Friday night, and it's an outdoor celebration. And then the commencement, the university commencement for all students, is the main ceremony on Saturday morning. And then individual schools, the individual academic schools, have their own specific ceremonies. And that's where the students actually walk across the stage. So that gives you sort of an overview of how it flows. So we hold this parent webinar at this point so that we can ask you to encourage your students and nudge them to go to Grad Fest, which will be next week when they return from spring break on Wednesday and Thursday. And it's several hours long, from 11 to 6, in a big ballroom on the second floor of the LBC. And it's really convenient for them to go and get everything done there. It's set up sort of as their one-stop shop for their graduation preparation. So they can do multiple things in that one space. They can purchase their cap and gown. They can order a Tulane ring. If they'd like, they can purchase a diploma frame. They can get personalized announcements. They can even have a free cap and gown portrait proof taken by a professional photographer. And that's the only opportunity they have to do that. They can visit with the staff from Alumni Relations, and they can learn more about the resources that are offered to them through the Alumni Association. And they can also participate in a survey and make a donation to the senior fund, the senior class fund. So just to give you a little bit more detail about those elements, you'll see that they can purchase their cap and gown, and those are the prices for the cap and gown and tassel, the mortarboard cap, or just the tassel. So they will buy and take home the cap, gown, and tassel at Grad Fest. So they need to hold on to that until May, but they also need to make sure that they, a couple of days before commencement, they take it out of the packaging and hang it up so the wrinkles will fall out of it. Now, it's very important to understand that the Tulane regalia is required to participate in commencement. It is, it's embroidered with Tulane insignia, so they cannot recycle another black commencement robe from some other, school or from high school. The same is true for the master's degrees. That is a different robe than the undergraduate one. So if your student is a grad student, they need to get the master's specific robe.
And the great thing about Grad Fest is that the folks from the bookstore are there on hand with all of the resources, able to answer students' questions about, I'm in this program in this school, this is the color tassel I have, this is the size gown I should have. It's really helpful to go to Grad Fest and get that professional's advice and recommendations about this is what I should do.
Yes, it'll help them answer those questions and keep from making a mistake. So it's really smart to have the student go to Grad Fest to get that assistance and guidance. So the other thing that they can do is order the Tulane ring. The Grad Fest is the deadline to order a ring in time for delivery before graduation. That last day to order would be March 14th, the second day of Grad Fest. If they end up ordering it after that date, then they should make sure that they provide shipping information to a permanent address, because it will not come before graduation. That also makes a great graduation present. If you want to do that as a surprise, then parents can order it online or over the phone. Diploma frames are another thing that students can purchase at Grad Fest, but that is another thing that could make a really great gift. So it's not required that they get a frame, but it's a great service and it's so nicely laid out. And they can order that, and representatives from that company will be there to assist them. But if your student doesn't do that at Grad Fest and then you want to make that a graduation gift, you can do that by ordering online or by phone. The other thing that they can get at Grad Fest are personalized announcements. Now, it's important to remember these are not invitations. Commencement doesn't require invitations or tickets, but it is an announcement. So those might be something that they would send to people who aren't even going to visit for the event. But it's a good way to let friends and family members know that they are graduating. So there will be representatives there, and there will be people there to make sure that they get all the correct terminology and language for their school, their major, the date and time, so that all of that is, so that all the wording is correct and all the language is appropriate and everything for their announcements. They can also have a cap and gown portrait taken, and that will be a proof. So they'll be provided with caps and gowns. If they plan to do that, then we recommend that the men wear a shirt and tie, but it'll be provided if they don't have their own. They just need to arrive kind of properly groomed and dressed for a portrait session. It is best if they're not wearing a turtleneck or a hoodie or any kind of shirt with a collar that would keep the gown from fitting properly. So just something for them to think about before they come. So all of the different stoles or tassels that students might end up having will be provided so they can use those for that cap and gown, and they're not having to use the ones that they're purchasing. They can keep those all packaged to save for their event. So within 7 to 10 business days, the students will get an email with a link to view their proof online, and then if they want to submit orders and payments, they can do that. So if your student is not available during those 5 or 6 hours on both of those days, then they can purchase the cap and gown at the bookstore during regular hours, or they can call. There is a $30 late fee for orders placed after this deadline you see on the screen. There will be a photo retake session, but it's only this one day on Thursday, April 16th from 10 to 1. They can order the announcements online at balfour.com or over the phone, and they can also order the ring online or over the phone. But as you can see, it's really nice not to have to take those separate steps and attend Grad Fest. So, this is just another reason why we would love for as many students as possible to come to that event, either of those days, so that they can just have the convenience of having the staff assistance to help them and just to get it all done in one place at one time. It's very festive. It's really fun. And so it's just another thing that kind of helps them celebrate their accomplishments too, to just participate in Grad Fest. So we'll turn our attention now to the kinds of tasks and planning that you might be doing. So we want to remind you of some resources that we provide in terms of lodging and rental cars. So when you get this PDF, you'll be able to open these links to the hotels and B&Bs that Tulane has a relationship with through our travel portal. I hope that you have already made your lodging reservations by now, but if you haven't, then I hope that you will do that this week. The May is a busy time of year in the city. So in addition to all of the people coming to Tulane for commencement, it's just a high tourism time and convention season as well. So please do that as soon as possible. There's also a link so that you can use our corporate discount on rental cars from a couple of different companies. So if you use those links and you're having any trouble, then you can contact Campus Services at that number to get some more support and assistance. So I'm going to turn things over to Ariana to start talking about just the variety of events that we have in May for you.
So commencement weekend there are a lot of different events, and depending on what program your student is in will kind of dictate what your weekend starts to look like. So on this screen, we already have what's happening on Friday. There's a Navy ROTC commissioning ceremony, the A.B. Freeman School of Business undergraduate diploma ceremony, and the Army ROTC commissioning ceremony all that morning. So if your student is in one of those programs, then you would be already kicking off your weekend early on Friday. Additionally, on Friday, we have the Newcomb-Tulane College Senior Awards Ceremony. This event is by invitation only, and it is right before the Wave Goodbye party. So when you're planning out your day, you definitely want to think about where you're going, what you're wearing, how far across campus you're trekking. For the Wave Goodbye party, it's an outdoor event in May in New Orleans. So it's warm, it's from 6 to 8. And so depending on if you were at one of those early ROTC events, and then you're also going to be on campus late that day, it's just really good to start looking at this schedule of events now and figuring out what your day is going to look like. As we move into Saturday, the University Commencement Ceremony, like we said, that's the main ceremony in the morning at 9 a.m. in the Superdome. All graduating students are invited to, and their guests are invited to participate in this ceremony. It's, there's a lot of pomp and circumstance, and it's very, I think, an iconic ceremony. So if you're starting your day early at 9 a.m. with that ceremony, then you're going to probably be moving into the school ceremonies throughout that afternoon. Again, you want to really plan out. We're starting downtown at 9 o'clock. And then we're going to end up on the Uptown campus maybe at 3 o'clock for this ceremony. You want to start thinking now about what your day looks like, whether you're staying downtown, whether you're staying uptown, what that means for your travel for that day, if you're Ubering or taxiing or parking, what does that mean for how much time you have lunch? All of those kind of logistic planning things are really helpful to start thinking about now and to start discussing with your student what they want to do that day. If they have a particular place they want to go for lunch or something like that, now's the time to start thinking about those schedules. And then finally, Sunday, residence halls close at noon, so we want to make sure your student is prepared to head out that day. So getting into some more details about Wave Goodbye, this is really kind of a Tulane version that honors all of the outdoor festivals that we have in New Orleans in the spring. It's food, music, wine, and beer. There's a cash bar available for wine and beer purchases. It's really just an opportunity for you to sit down with your student and their friends and their family and have a good time and celebrate your students' accomplishments. It is an outdoor event, like I said, so most people dress very casually. We do have, I think we always get a question about what to wear. What do people wear? And it really depends on what else you're doing that day. I definitely highly recommend being comfortable in lightweight clothing. But if you're just going to stop at Wave Goodbye for a little while and then maybe go to a fancier dinner, that might dictate what you're wearing versus someone who maybe is just going to go walk around in the quarter after. I would say that your other plans very much will kind of dictate what you wear that day, but by all means be comfortable.
And I think the main thing too is that, anything kind of goes. So, people will understand if you come in t-shirt and jeans, and it'll also be understandable if you're more dressed up because you're going on to a more formal dinner.
Yes.
But do keep in mind heat and humidity.
Yes.
And walking around on sidewalks and the quad.
Yes, the event is on the quad, and we have some tables and chairs set up for people to sit down and eat and enjoy the music. But yes, it is sometimes if it rains that day, it could be a little mushy. So you don't want your beautiful suede shoes to get messy. Those are all things to think about, especially before you get here when you're starting to pack. What kind of things do I pack to be ready for this day? So
your fanciest stiletto heels may just end up really muddy. So I keep seeing that every year, and I just think, oh, they're going to mess up those shoes. So things like that, are just some advice to guide you.
Yes, and I do want to note, last year for Wave Goodbye, we had some severe weather, and unfortunately, we had to cancel Wave Goodbye because it was just such a bad thunderstorm.
And lightning.
Yes.
And street flooding.
And so I do want to kind of mentally prepare you guys. We plan to have Wave Goodbye as it's billed as a rain or shine event. It can sometimes be muddy and messy, but it's still very fun. But we do want to make sure you're thinking about if Wave Goodbye was canceled, what other plans would you make? Are you going to go have dinner with your guests somewhere else? It's a possibility. So we just want to plant that seed in your head now so you're prepared if that eventuality come about.
If it had to be canceled, it would be posted on the website, right?
Yes. So we have on the main Tulane website, we have an alert that will go out that it has been canceled. And we'll also push those out through the university's main social media channels.
Okay. So that would be a time when it probably would not be smart to email parents at tulane.edu, because that would be kind of after hours and I wouldn't necessarily be answering that. I think I did some of that last year, but it just sort of happened at the last minute. So it would be really important the day of the event to kind of watch the Tulane homepage, because then any last minute announcements would be posted really prominently on the Tulane homepage. I wanted to ask you to say a little bit more about the food, because most people kind of use that more as like hors d'oeuvres before they go out to dinner rather than their meal. How would you describe that?
So, and Valerie, I don't know if you want to chime in a little bit here too. I would say there are lots of different food options. But a lot of people it's a short event. It's from 6 to 8. And most people want to spend time with their student, and they don't necessarily want to spend time waiting in line for food. So they'll go and get maybe a couple of things and hang out and talk to some of the professors that they've never gotten to meet before, and then move on to have dinner, like a bigger dinner somewhere else.
It's very free-flowing. People move around from tables to then standing in line to get something, and the sizes are sort of like sampler sizes of a lot of dishes. Wouldn't you say, Valerie?
I would say most of them are slightly larger than the sample
size,
but they're not meant to be a full-size entree or anything. So there's things like jambalaya, Louisiana meat pies, pulled pork sandwiches, red beans and rice. We have vegetarian and vegan options as well. So there's a little bit of everything there. You could make a meal off of it if you went, and picked up enough things. But like if you just went and got one sample of something, it probably would not be enough for a meal. A lot of people, that's what they do, and they spend the entire 2 hours, just walking around getting food and drinking. And that's, I would say that most people probably stay pretty much the whole time. They get here at 6, so it's really crowded when you're trying to get in the gate. There's a backup in the line to get inside, and then as people flow through, they usually stay for a few hours. There is a lot of tables and chairs, but there isn't enough for everybody at the same time. So sometimes we usually have enough chairs where people can just grab some chairs and sit down, but there's not always enough tables for everyone at the same time.
I would say too, I know for most people when you plan a trip to New Orleans, you plan it all around your meals and where you're going to go to eat. I mean, that's the way we live in New Orleans. We talk about where we're going to eat lunch at breakfast, and we talk about where we're going to have dinner over lunch. So we completely understand that. But I would say that even if you already have your heart set on, fitting in one more dinner at your favorite restaurant on Friday night, I think it's still smart to stop by this event, even if you're not planning to make it your meal, because it's very festive and it is just a place where you can see a lot of people, and that can be really meaningful to run into your students, freshman year roommate and their parents, or see their favorite professor or something. So I would certainly say stop in and experience it, even for a little while, even if you do plan to go somewhere else. Would you talk about the tickets?
Oh, yes. So each student gets 7 e-tickets. We email all graduating students with instructions about how to get those tickets. We usually don't make those live until the end of April, beginning of May, because we have the ticketing site open for a designated amount of time, and it's easier for us to have everyone getting into the system at the same time so we can answer any questions that your student might have or any problems printing tickets, things like that. But each student gets 7 tickets that they can go into the system, download, print out, and a lot of times students won't use all 7 of their tickets. They do need one for themselves. So it's not just, I have 7 tickets to give away to all of my guests and parents and friends, and then I don't need one. They do need a ticket for themselves. But a lot of times students don't use all of their ticket allotment. So they'll kind of share as needed, and to make sure that, oh, well, my friend needs 2 extra tickets and I'm not using 2. We also, if you find that you need one more ticket, we also start fielding requests for additional tickets through the TU grad at.Tulane.edu email address. We try to get a better sense of how many students are requesting tickets before we start giving additional tickets out. And we try to limit those additional tickets because it is, we are very packed to the gills for this event. We try to include as many students and parents as want to be there, but that does mean we have a finite amount of resources and space, and we want to make sure it's a comfortable event for everyone. So those additional requests are taken as they come through.
Okay. So,
yes, so there are a number of additional, just besides food and music and fun times at Wave Goodbye, you also want to make sure to stop by the alumni station at CUD Hall. Students are able to get a free gift if they stop by. It's a limited edition poster for the event that celebrates the class of 2019. And every year it's a new design specifically for that class.
And framing that for your graduate also makes a nice graduation gift if you need to give that suggestion to somebody in your family or consider that yourself.
The Alumni Association also does a backdrop if you stop by that station. And it's a good time to just meet the alumni relations staff as your student makes this transition from student to alum. So parking on campus during commencement weekend activities is available normally during regular operating hours on campus. We have permitted parking, but that is suspended the Friday of commencement as well as that weekend. So you won't have to have a special permit to be able to park on campus. We just ask that you still respect all of the reserved all hours parking signs and the no parking areas. Don't park in fire lanes or things like that. But otherwise, any of the regular parking spaces on campus are available. And we also work with Loyola University next door so that guests can use that garage as well.
And you enter that garage from Ferret Street?
Yes. So as we move into the University Commencement Ceremony on Saturday morning, that's at 9 a.m. at the Superdome. Students should arrive by 8 a.m. so that they can check in, get in the robing room, and start getting in line for the ceremony. For guests, the doors open at 7:30. The music starts at 8:30, and then the academic procession starts promptly at 9 a.m. And the procession takes about half an hour, so then the ceremony itself really kicks off at 9:30. It's a really special ceremony. I can't tell you how many times I've had parents come up to me and say, I've never seen a commencement like this before. It's truly unique, and it's festive, and there's musical interludes and pyrotechnics and second lining, and it is quite a show. And a lot of parents will ask, well, I don't understand why should I go to this ceremony when my student is going to walk across the stage at the school ceremony? Isn't that the only thing I really need to go to? And so at this ceremony, you have President Fitz makes his address, the keynote speaker makes their address, the student speaker makes their address, and you have the conferring of the degrees. It really has all of the pomp and circumstance and the weight of just a beautiful, beautiful ceremony. And I think it's something not to be missed. So this year's keynote speaker is going to be Apple CEO Tim Cook. I'm really excited about it, and I think he's going to deliver a great address. So as we start thinking about navigating through the day, we did note earlier that students have to wear the Tulane regalia. So they should show up at commencement day with all of their pieces and parts. It's sometimes still amazes me when a student doesn't, open the bag or check the bag to make sure that everything's actually in there or that nothing fell out.
And the tassels are in the bag.
The tassel is in the bag. And so it's really important that they're aware of their stuff and that they bring their robe, their mortarboard, and their tassel.
And I forgot to mention, if they are getting 2 degrees from 2 different schools, they can purchase both tassels, and they can wear both, and they don't necessarily have to go to both ceremonies if there's a time conflict, or if you just feel like you don't want to be in 3 different ceremonies in one day. That might be understandable. What it seems most students do is that they select the undergraduate, diploma ceremony, where maybe more of their friends will also be, and so they might make that decision. Now, of course, they are welcome to go to both if they have, if they're getting degrees from 2 different schools, but they can certainly wear both tassels. They can wear both tassels to the main commencement ceremony, and then, the specific one for the graduation ceremony that they go to.
Which again is why it's really good to go to Grad Fest, because then it's easier to, yes, you can have both of these tassels, and these are the color tassels you need for those programs. But so getting back to the ceremony itself, it is really important for students to arrive on time to the Superdome. We have an 8 a.m. check-in time for them because we need to get them to the areas where they will process with their school. And with 3,000 graduating students, we need to make sure everyone is where they need to be so that we can get people lined up and ready for the academic procession to start promptly at 9 o'clock. It is a long ceremony, especially if you're arriving right at 7:30. That means you've already been up for a little while, getting dressed, getting ready. I would definitely eat before you come to the ceremony. At the Superdome, they do have concessions for sale, but it is, it's stadium food. So you're not going to have the cream of the crop options for your heart's desire at that moment. So I would definitely suggest eating breakfast before you come, so that you're ready to get through the whole ceremony. We do have a suggestion here that perhaps you'd like to have your students stay with you in your hotel the night before so you can all go to the ceremony together. It makes coordinating things a little easier. But however you're going to navigate that morning, you should communicate with your student and make plans ahead of time, so that you and your student both know how you're getting to the ceremony, which ceremony you're going to after the 9 a.m. ceremony, when you're fitting in lunch. All of those details are things that you should talk about with your student in advance. As far as transportation, the university does run a shuttle service from the Uptown campus to the Superdome. A lot of our students, that's how they get to the ceremony. They do start the shuttles at 7 a.m. So if your student has to be at the Superdome for 8, you want to make sure that you're on one of those shuttles that are leaving between 7 and 7:30, 7:45, so that you're arriving on time. The shuttle runs continuously all day long, picking up from the Uptown campus and at the Superdome. So it'll run back and forth and bring you back to campus after the main ceremony ends, if you're coming to campus for other ceremonies. So it might be a situation where you want to look at your schedule of events and see, okay, well, I can park on campus, take the shuttle, go to the ceremony downtown, take the shuttle back to campus, and finish my day. If, for example, I'm at a ceremony at Dixon at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it might be easier for you to park on campus and take the shuttle with your student if that's what you want to do.
Especially if you're staying somewhere uptown, like a lot of people are in Airbnb kind of locations close to campus if they're not downtown in a big hotel or something. So, yeah, parents are definitely welcome to use that shuttle. There's an error there on that bullet point, so that's supposed to be Saturday, May 18th.
18th.
We'll fix that before we send it to you. But consider the shuttles and how that might fit into your whole day and add more convenience for you too.
For guests, the doors open at 7:30. I would definitely recommend getting there in that 7:30 to 8:30 window. In that last half an hour, there are a lot of people coming through the gate at that time. You have to go through security. You have to go through metal detectors. It's crowded. There's traffic. There's lines of people trying to get into the parking garage and pay for parking and do all of the things. All of those pieces and parts take time. And so it's really important. The more important it is for you to have a good seat, the closer to 7:30 you should be. We do have large screens on the stage, so there's no bad seat in the house, but the closer to 9 o'clock that you arrive, if you have a group of 15 people, the less likely you're going to be able to all sit together. So those are things you want to think about as you're planning out your arrival time and how you're getting to the dome and all of those details. I will say it's really important, and this is a tip not just for you and your guests, but also your students, to wear comfortable shoes. The Superdome is large, and walking from the parking garage or your Uber to the entrance and the entrance to the seating area and then the seating area to the restroom or the concession area or where the bookstore is selling things, there's a lot of walking involved. And it's really important. I can't tell you how many students I've seen walking barefoot, holding their heels in their hands, because they just didn't realize how difficult it was going to be to navigate the Superdome in those high heels. So it's really important that you wear those comfortable shoes. Some additional details: parking is $15 at the Superdome. It's cash only. The logistics of that day, we have the students sitting on the floor with the stage area, and the guests are all seated in the stadium seating in the Superdome. So there is an opportunity for you and your student to sit together during the ceremony. So if you want to get your pictures in, if you arrive together and want to take a picture out in front of the Superdome in the nice, beautiful, natural light, I would recommend that. Or if you want to plan your meetup location beforehand, sometimes it's really difficult to navigate the Superdome. I'm very familiar with the building, and I even sometimes get turned around. And so for guests who have never been in the building before, it's easy to get turned around. It's a big circular building. And so it's important that you, ahead of time, kind of talk to your student and figure out where you're going to meet. If you're taking the shuttle, that means you're meeting in this location. If you parked in garage 6 on level A, those kinds of details, you want to make sure that you and your student have a good plan to meet up and know where that is.
And we have a diagram of the Superdome coming up, and it's also online on the website.
And I did mention the bookstore will have a setup in the Superdome, so you can buy gifts and things for your student. Some additional notes, like Penny said earlier, if you're receiving a degree from more than one school, students will pick which ceremony they want to go to, or if they want to go to both or all three. At Grad Fest, we'll be giving students more information about the schedule when they purchase regalia, so they can really start to get a better picture of what their day starts to look like. Like I said, at the university ceremony in the morning, it is lots of pomp and circumstance. So the students don't have their name called. They don't walk across a stage. All of those things happen at their individual school ceremonies. When their name is called and they walk across the stage, that's when they get their picture taken.
And I think we should clarify too that they get a diploma folder. They get a nice embossed folder, but it doesn't actually contain their diploma. That will be mailed to them later. So that also means that if they're getting 2 degrees from 2 different schools and they choose to go to one, that doesn't mean they're going to miss out on getting that diploma from the other ceremony, because they'll be mailed to them later. So, and that's where a photograph is taken as well, and they'll get information from their individual school about how they can order those.
So this is a map of the Superdome to kind of give you an idea of where entrances are and where it's best for students and guests to come through. We have access to each of those blue garages on this map. It really depends where you enter. If you're entering from, say, Poydras, there will be police officers on hand to kind of help direct you to where you should be going. If you have guests who are elderly or wheelchair bound or just need assistance getting to the seating areas, you can see from this map the Gate A entrance on Sugar Bowl Drive just off of Poydras is the only entrance that is easily accessible from the street for people to be dropped off and walk in the door. So I think in the next slide, yes, I have some information and I'll go into specifics about that. But this will give you an idea of where you're coming in, where you're parking, and what gates are available for you to use. The gates A, B, C, D, and I can't remember if we do E or not.
We do use E, but it's kind of like an overflow area. It's not easy to get to that.
Gates A and C are the biggest gates for guests to come in. And so where you park in relation to those gates, those are the ones that are easiest to come in. The gate G entrance for students is a student-only entrance. So if you're coming from garage 5 or 6, don't be surprised when you're asked to keep moving to walk to the gate A entrance. That gate G entrance comes in the back of house. And is a student-only entrance because we're getting them to those robing areas from that entrance. So it's not accessible to guests.
Is that also where the shuttles will drop off the students?
The shuttles will drop off near the Gate A entrance. Again, Gate A faces Poydras, and it's the only entrance that's easily accessible to pedestrians.
Poydras is parallel to Canal Street, if you need some kind of reference points. It's perpendicular to the river. So it's, one of the main streets through our central business district, if you haven't ever been to the Dome.
So some more information about if you have guests who need assistance. There is handicap seating available for guests at the Superdome. I will make a note here that the handicap seating in the Superdome is designed for NFL games and other large-scale events, and it is not designed for the number of elderly and handicapped guests that we have at Tulane's commencement. It's not not to say that we're not going to accommodate people, but I just want you to have realistic expectations. If you show up at 9 a.m. And you have a guest in a wheelchair, we're gonna figure out a space to have you, but you're not going to get ideal seating because the handicap seating areas do get very tight, and we are always trying to maximize the amount of space that we can use in those handicap accessible areas. So if you have guests who need assistance, please don't hesitate to arrive early. And just be very respectful and mindful of guests who do need the space. We try to leave space for guests and guests who need assistance or guests who are handicapped, plus one additional person to stay with them. We don't want, one person who needs assistance and 10 of their family members to take up space in the handicap areas that other people need access to as well. So we just ask people to be very mindful of the space that guests who need assistance really need. As I mentioned earlier, there is a lot of walking involved in commencement day at the Superdome. And so we see a high volume of guests who just need assistance getting to the seating areas and who are not necessarily wheelchair bound, but maybe are just elderly or maybe had a recent surgery or accident or something where they just need some help getting to the seating area. And so we have volunteers on hand at the Gate A entrance, where the ground level entrance, where you can walk in. We will have volunteers with wheelchairs. I kind of describe it like a wheelchair taxi service, where volunteers will come pick you up at the Gate A ground level entrance, help you get to the seating area, drop you off at that area, and then go back and help more guests. It is something that if you want to have a wheelchair with you at all times, we ask that you rent your own wheelchair, because the wheelchairs we use for the volunteer service, we're constantly using them to help other guests.
And that means rent it from another source. You can't rent them at the Superdome. And the next slide will show you a couple of resources in town where you could rent that if you need to have that with you the whole time and for, a couple of days. Mm-hmm. So,
I would also note that over the hour and a half that the gates are open from 7:30 to 9, our volunteers are constantly helping guests get to the seating area. And so over an hour and a half, we help people get in. When we're leaving, everyone's leaving at the same time. So it does cause some congestion at the end of the ceremony when everyone who is helped in also needs help getting out. And we just ask that you're patient as we try to help everyone get out. It does take some time. And so be very mindful of that as you're making your arrangements for a lunch reservation. The ceremony doesn't end until 11, and then it's going to take you some time to get out of the building. If you need to connect with your student and all leave together, that takes time too. So make sure you're really thinking out how much time it's going to take you to get out of the building, meet up, travel to wherever you're going. I've definitely run into some stressed out parents because my reservation is at 11:30 and we're not going to make it. And they didn't factor in the getting out of the building time. So be very mindful of that. It does take a little bit of time. And if you have one of those ceremonies where you only have a tight window before your next ceremony starts, you need to be really thoughtful about where you're traveling to and what that means for your lunch schedule.
I've definitely talked to a couple of parents who've called in the last few weeks to kind of sort through some of those things. And, they are finding that if they've got one of those shorter turnaround times between ceremonies, that they may just want to kind of have some snacks with them or something and kind of picnic it in the car on the way to the other ceremony and then have a bigger meal later, a really late lunch or an early dinner or something. So we hope that this description of how things flow will help you make more realistic plans for the day.
Be reminded they can't take food
right
into the Superdome.
Yes, you cannot take food in there with you. So it might be something that you have, in your car or, back at your hotel or something like that.
And then also just a quick note about if you're renting a wheelchair, but then your guest isn't going to sit in the wheelchair at the ceremony, please make sure that you check your wheelchair at the Guest Relations Center at the Gate A Plaza level entrance. It sounds strange to say sometimes, but the number of wheelchairs that end up missing or it happens because maybe a volunteer or a Superdome staff think, oh, this is one of our wheelchairs, I'm going to use it to help other guests. If you rented a wheelchair and your guest isn't sitting in it, occupying it, it's very important that you check it with guest relations so it's in a secure location, and then you can go after the ceremony and pick it up. Otherwise, they tend to go missing. And this is a slide to give you information about available companies who we would recommend for wheelchair rental. Both of these options, there's some details here about hours and locations. Just be mindful of your schedule and when you're getting into town, when you can pick up, and making sure all of those details mesh with what your needs are. And then as we start getting into the details of the various ceremonies for undergraduates, I feel like maybe I'm a broken record at this point, but it's really important to look at your schedule of events and how that meshes up with, we're going to this event, we're having lunch at this time, we're going to be in this neighborhood, here are some options that are nearby. Some of the schedule is very tight. So, for example, the university ceremony at the Superdome is from 9 to 11. The School of Science and Engineering undergraduate ceremony and the School of Liberal Arts ceremony both start at 1 o'clock. And it might seem like 2 hours is a big window of time for you to stop and get lunch, but that really depends on a lot on your travel. If you are at the undergraduate ceremony at the university ceremony in the Superdome, and you're staying at the Superdome for the 1 o'clock ceremony at Liberal Arts, you're most likely going to just want to eat something in the Superdome and just stay in the Superdome. It's actually kind of a pain to, I think, instinctively, when everyone leaves the building, people want to leave the building, and then they end up outside and are trying to figure out what entrance they need to go back into because they have to stay in the building. So just, those are things to think about when you're sitting down in the morning and maybe you don't have an ideal seat and you're like, okay, we're going to get up when everyone leaves, but then we're going to go downstairs and get a better seat. Typically, that's all you have time for. So leaving the building and going somewhere else to get lunch and sit down and eat, you don't actually have a lot of time for that.
And the students have to line up again for their liberal arts, graduation ceremony. So they aren't even free that whole time, from 11 to 1, because it really, they need to be at the room at 12. And there will be some light refreshments for them provided by the School of Liberal Arts for the students, so that tides them over. And so most likely parents would be eating from the Superdome concessions or something, and then have a bigger meal together later somewhere else at a restaurant or wherever you're staying.
If you're doing the School of Science and Engineering, I would highly recommend, if you are in the Uptown area, parking at the campus and taking the shuttle. The shuttle is going to be the fastest way back to campus and give you the most time before the 1 o'clock ceremony for science and engineering if you want to sit in the LBC and have a little lunch, quick lunch. That's going to kind of maximize your available time.
You won't have to worry about parking. Mm-hmm. You won't have to navigate through the traffic because you'll just be on the shuttle and the bus driver will do all that for you.
Yes. Whereas if you look at some of these later ceremonies, professional advancement starts at 2. The School of Architecture reception starts at 2. Those ceremonies, you have a little bit more room if you were going to stop and have a quick lunch. But I would also say that it's still not a ton of time to have a long sit-down meal. It's more of you have a little more wiggle room, and you probably still just want to have something quick and nearby, and then maybe plan on having a bigger dinner that evening. And then the architecture reception, I believe, has light refreshments. And then that directly rolls into their ceremony at 4 o'clock. And then the School of Public Health has their ceremony at 3:30 at the Mahalia Jackson Theater, which is about 1.5 miles from the Superdome. So that's another thing where you want to look at where the Superdome is, where the theater is. You do have some time, given the 3:30 start time, to actually have a full lunch. But you still want to stay in that general area. You don't want to go to a completely different neighborhood and end up being late to the ceremony or something like that. So we're just going to quickly go through and give you some additional details about some of those school ceremonies. The School of Architecture ceremony is back here on campus, on the Uptown campus, on that Saturday. The reception starts at 2 o'clock. The ceremony starts at 4 o'clock. So again, there is a little bit bigger of a window between 11:30 and 2 for a lunch break. But you do want to think about where you're parking, where you're going. If you're lunching downtown versus uptown, start thinking about those options.
I was just going to note that I think on most of these slides for the individual schools, there's also a contact information, because those details are all planned by a particular person in the school. So that way, if you had any further questions that are finer details about that ceremony, then you should contact the school contact. And so you'll see that on the website, but also here on the slides.
The School of Business undergraduate ceremony is on Friday. So that happens obviously before the university ceremony on Saturday. It's at 10 a.m. And doors open at 9 for that ceremony. Tickets are not required. This is a limited seating event though. And so seating is available first come, first serve, with an additional overflow available in the business school complex. It's also available for guests if it's the overflow area is a little more handicap wheelchair friendly. The ceremony in Devlin, it's not that it isn't handicap accessible. It just really depends on the number of guests who are using that handicap accessible seating. And so it may be a situation where you're just going to be more comfortable in the overflow room anyway. And you're welcome to take advantage of that.
If they're in the overflow room, they'll be closer to where the reception is held afterwards, right? So yes. If you really do have somebody for whom you're trying to minimize all that kind of back and forth, and their mobility is an issue, then that may be something to consider. Just absolutely. Start with them, in the overflow room. Then they won't have to move again for the reception. And so, is it being broadcast into the overflow room? It is. So there'll be like a closed circuit broadcast of what's happening in the arena, so that they can watch it all from the overflow room.
And then students for this ceremony need to report at 8:30 for lineup. It's really important. It might seem like all of these lineup times are early, but it's important for students to arrive on time for all of these events.
Especially since that is where their name's going to be called. So they need to be in the right place so the right name gets called and the right person goes across the stage so you can understand.
And again, these are the ceremonies where students have photographers take their picture as they walk across the stage. So each of these ceremonies will have a photographer. And the parking note is, again, parking available on campus as well as in the Loyola garage. And then the reception starts directly after the ceremony around noon.
In the building across the street.
Yes. The School of Liberal Arts ceremony is at the Superdome. It basically, the university ceremony happens in the morning, and then we immediately start cleaning up and flipping the room for the 1 o'clock ceremony for all of the School of Liberal Arts graduates. All of this, I think we kind of went through quickly when we talked about the ceremony. There isn't a lot of time for you to leave and come back, so just be very mindful of that. Parking is, again, the same, $15 cash only at the Superdome, and we run that same wheelchair volunteer system at this ceremony at the Superdome as well.
So but the parking, if you go to the university ceremony, that $15 parking fee will last all day, even if you leave and come back. So
Okay.
you don't have to pay $15
Again. The School of Professional Advancement ceremony is also on Saturday at 2 o'clock here on campus in McAllister Auditorium. Students need to arrive by noon at the LBC to line up. And again, this window is tight, but you do probably have some time to stop and grab a quick bite at the LBC between the two ceremonies. Again, McAllister has very limited accessibility for disabled, handicapped, or guests who need assistance. The bathrooms in that building are not very easily accessible. So if you have any guests who have very specific needs or more than just standard handicap wheelchair accessibility issues, please don't hesitate to reach out to the school coordinators listed for these ceremonies so that they can make appropriate arrangements for you in advance. It's much easier to do those kinds of arrangements if we know about it ahead of time. And then the School of Public Health has their ceremony at Mahalia Jackson at 3:30. This ceremony is for both undergraduate and graduate students, but all graduating students need to arrive by 2 o'clock for robing. And then guest seating is also available at 2 o'clock. Science and Engineering is at 1 o'clock on Saturday, back here on the Uptown campus in Devlin Fieldhouse. Again, Devlin Fieldhouse does not have a lot of handicap accessibility. It is wheelchair accessible and there's ramps, but depending on how many guests need that space will really dictate how comfortable you're going to be in that ceremony. There is a link here for additional information and when students should be arriving.
Okay, so if your student does live on campus, they do need to take care of a few logistical details. Make sure that you remind them to complete a mail forwarding form that's linked here online. If they live off campus, they need to submit a change of address order with the U.S. Post Office. There is a FedEx office store in the LBC. So if they need to pack and ship belongings from there, they're able to do that. And we also have consulted with the Summertime Storage Company. That is the local company Tulane recommends for storage between academic years. They will also provide shorter term storage for graduating seniors if you call them and consult with them ahead of time. So sometimes that's come up because the student may be finishing up with graduation, but then they've got a month's time before their new job starts or something, and they don't want to move all those belongings, home to you in New Jersey when their job is going to be in California or something. So they can work out some prorated short-term storage if that's needed. Other things about residence hall checkout, it's very much like, they've had to do in previous years, but they need to think ahead, not leave it till the last minute. They need to consult with their roommates so that they've, agreed to clean everything up, and, depending on who the last person is, takes care of all of the details and makes a checkout appointment with their RA so that they can make sure all of that gets done, and you don't get a final bill from Tulane because they didn't clean up their room or didn't take care of some damage or something. So they do have to be out by Sunday, the 12th, Sunday at 12. And I saw that there's another date there we need to correct. So a couple of other things about diplomas.
So I think we mentioned this earlier, but just to reiterate, students don't actually get their diplomas on commencement weekend. Those are mailed to them with the mailing address that we have on file for them. If they need to update that, they can do so on the Gibson online portal. The only exception to that is the School of Medicine's Doctor of Medicine students. They actually get their diplomas for certification reasons on commencement day. But an additional note about confidentiality, there is a confidentiality clause in their student information on the Gibson online portal. If your student has checked this confidentiality clause, we cannot give their name in the list of graduates that we send to the Times-Picayune and the Advocate, and their name won't be on the t-shirt that we sell at commencement that has a list of graduating students on it. The confidentiality clause makes it illegal for us to share that information because they have checked this box.
And that has meant that their contact information is not made public anywhere. So
yes.
For 3.5 years, that may have been exactly what they wanted. They didn't want that listed on the Tulane website or anything, but now for this particular thing with graduation, they might want to be, included in this list. So if that's the case, they need to log into Gibson Online and uncheck that box.
And they can do this anytime during the semester, but we want to manage your expectation and make sure if you bought the t-shirt and you're looking for your grad's name on the back and it's not there, this is why.
So it'd probably be best that they change that probably soon. So I would say Grad Fest is another time to kind of check off that as well, just to make sure that's done. Okay, so the bookstore will be open over the weekend, so there's some hours. And then just to quickly give you a couple last notes, because we're kind of going long here. I do think that it's important that you know about resources for new graduates that are offered by the Alumni Association. So it's a really smart thing for your student to get registered on Tulane Connect, which is the online resources that helps them take advantage of networking opportunities with other alumni, and that they're aware that there are Tulane clubs all across the country and abroad, and your students' membership in that is free. They just need to kind of connect with them, and they'll start getting invitations to happy hours and networking receptions and events when there are visiting faculty who might come to do a special lecture, or if President Fitz is going to be in town, he's going to talk to the alumni club there. It's a really great way for students for recent graduates, young alumni, young professionals to make connections in a new city, especially if they move somewhere else. I've definitely been in contact with alumni who have gotten involved in this and, met people, made connections, found, their second or third job, through connections they made with alumni in their new hometown. And so we certainly encourage them to consider this and think about that. Most of our alumni clubs have a Mardi Gras party. They have game watching parties. They have other social events. They have crawfish boils every spring.
Like day of service events.
Yeah, they do community service activities, networking kinds of things and educational things. So it's social, recreational, networking, career development. So it's really a great thing for them to stay connected. And I think it's also a nice thing for young professionals, recent graduates, to get involved in something. So they meet people from at different age groups, different generations. And that can be really helpful. But sometimes it's really useful for them to have another way to meet other people their own age, other young alumni. So it can be a really helpful thing when they're moving to a new place and trying to make friends and get connected. So these are the commencement dates for the future. Those are always listed on commencement.tulane.edu. Sometimes people are looking at that because they want to go ahead and make hotel reservations. So just note that some hotels will only take reservations a year in advance. Others are willing to do it, with a longer time horizon than that. So if you've got a particular hotel that's your favorite, I think it's worth calling them to ask. But do that as soon as you can. So we're going to take just a few questions now. So we'll remind you of the website and the email, and also ask that when you're here for commencement, please share your family photos on social media with hashtag Tulane19. It'll be lovely to see how you're celebrating with your family and your Tulane grad. So if you have questions, now is the time to type them in. It's already almost 8:30, so we're probably just going to take a few questions. Hopefully we've answered a lot of your questions. And if you have some particular questions, then you can always email. So give us a second here. So there's some questions about hotels, and I will just say that if you go to the parent program's website and look under events, there are travel resources there, and the link to the Tulane travel portal is there, and there is an interactive hotel map. So you can look at the hotels you're interested in, and you can look on the map and see where they are. So we don't usually give particular hotel reservations, but we set that up so that you can find all that information in one place. So if you're not sure about the school that your student's major is in, then that is something that your student can, they should know. For instance, musical theater is in the School of Liberal Arts. Somebody asked about that. But talk with your student about that. They should be getting invitations and emails from their own school. I would say it's a very important thing for your student not to get too distracted, a little too lazy, and stop reading their Tulane email. In this last couple of months, if your student's about to graduate, they need to be paying attention to their email. So let's see here. Let's see. So there may have been some people who tuned in at the wrong time. Sometimes I think GoToWebinar doesn't always, it's supposed to give you the right time zone. So if you might have tuned in at the wrong time, you will get a link to the video recording so you can watch this, or you can review the slides on your own. So anybody who registered tonight, registered for the event, whether you tuned in live or not, will receive an email follow-up with the video.
So we got a question about the new event we did this year where we announced the speaker at President Fitz's house. We just started this event this year in the hopes that it would be successful. and that students would enjoy it and come to it with the idea that we could potentially do it again. I make no promises at this point because we're still worrying about this year. But when we had the kickoff announcement event, it was with the idea that we would hopefully be able to do this type of event every year.
So can you answer this? How many shuttles are running? Is there a long wait for them to get to the Superdome, back uptown after the ceremony? It's continuous, the continuous loop. So you might have to...
Depending on what time of day, there are a certain number of buses, but it's always an adequate number to be continually running. So you really wouldn't have to wait very long, for sure, if you had to wait at all.
I would say that when we spoke to the shuttle coordinator, he said to reach out if you were planning to use this shuttle at a non-peak time. So, for example, if you were going to the liberal arts ceremony for 1 o'clock downtown, but you didn't go to the unified ceremony and you're traveling at like 11 o'clock from the uptown campus to the Superdome when they haven't started the regular schedule of bringing everybody back and dropping people off, then there might not be as much availability, but it is a continuous service. And they have shuttle drivers who are specifically assigned to like peak times.
Okay. So here's a question we could clarify about how the wheelchair assistance works. Do we need to contact somebody before graduation to get assistance with elderly guests at the Superdome, or can we just drop them off at Gate A? And I would say it's good to have at least one person in your party stay with your guest who needs assistance, and then they'll follow the volunteer who's going to take your guest, in the wheelchair. You follow along with them. Have at least one person in your party do that. Then they can kind of text back to the rest of the folks, where you end up sitting, and so you can get together. But rather than just dropping off your one guest who needs the wheelchair assistance and them being by themselves.
Yes.
Right.
Typically what happens is, the driver will pull up to the Gate A ground entrance, drop off their party. Their party will go with the volunteers, and the volunteer will get them to the seating area. And the driver will go and park and then meet up with the rest of the party later.
So there is a question about whether the Superdome searches bags for food. They are not supposed to bring in any food or drinks, so they search bags. You don't have to have the clear bags, but they will open them up and look and check. Okay. Here's just maybe a trivia question. How many guests are typically at the Superdome for Tulane Commencement? Anybody have an idea?
So it depends, honestly, on the size of the class and who the guest speaker is. So, for example, the Dalai Lama year that we had him as the keynote speaker was the largest commencement that we've ever had, and we had about 30,000 guests that year.
So let's see. Somebody asked what the LBC is. I apologize that we use that acronym. It's the Lavin Burnick Center. So that's the big university center with the bookstore and the food court and all of that. So that might be a spot where you would grab something quick to eat, depending on which ceremony you're going to. Let's see. So I think that answers most of the questions that have come through. If any of you are still out there hanging on after 8:30, we appreciate your persistence, and we hope we've answered your questions. Oh, one last question. Is it better to be dropped off further away from the Superdome and walk? If so, where would you suggest? And I would say come to the zone.
I think it's usually traffic. There's congestion. Obviously, everyone's trying to get into one building at the same time. But unless there's some kind of accident or some other circumstance, typically traffic moves fairly quickly.
And it's a
There
really
have been traffic jams, and there have been times when that's happened. And it really kind of depends. I mean, on Saturdays, it's not free to park on the street downtown. So, and there's a 2-hour limit on meters. So that would be an issue, I think, for somebody trying to park on the street. There are some lots, like just,
pay by the hour lots.
pay by the hour lots that you can park, that are not that far away, 2-3 blocks away. And that's an option. I mean, if everybody in your party is willing to walk a little bit, I mean, people do it all the time for games, they walk a lot of blocks to get inside the Superdome. So, it just depends. I mean, if you have the time, it's of course easier to park in the garage at the Superdome. But then that will be an issue again when you're getting out. I mean, it gets locked up with everybody trying to leave at the same time. So it's just up to the individual, I think.
So a couple of last questions. The last event is Saturday, so there is nothing formal planned on Sunday. It's just the checkout day if your student's living on campus. Let's see. Does hashtag Tulane19 work on Facebook?
Yes, hashtags work on Facebook.
So yes, do that. Post your photos. We love seeing that. And can you explain the umbrella tradition?
So the second line umbrellas are something that happens at commencement. It is also second line umbrellas are part of the second line tradition in New Orleans. And so people for maybe a specific second line might decorate a very ornate type of umbrella with glitter and feathers and all kinds of things. It's just a nice touch point at the ceremony itself. They are not distributed to every student. It's a limited number. That's just a little extra bit of flair.
Kind of like Zulu coconuts.
Yes.
Sometimes you're just lucky enough to catch one, right?
Right. This year we are doing a mortarboard and umbrella decorating event for students so that if they want to make their own umbrella, they can come do that in the LBC on commencement week.
It's Tuesday. So we have some events that have been happening last few years that are sponsored by the Lab and Burning Center staff that are called Tulane Tuesdays. So the very last one for seniors this year will be a mortarboard decorating event. And so supplies will be provided so they can come. The mortarboards have been very, very creative. So it's kind of just our chance to watch students doing this and help support that creativity. So definitely something they'll get a lot of information about that up in the next several weeks. It just all got sort of finalized recently, so they probably haven't even heard about it yet. So I would say if you have any quick feedback you want to give us now before we close, then you can type that in if you'd like, or I'll just remind you again that if you have any feedback, any suggestions for the future, or anything you'd like to share about this webinar, then please email me at parents@tulane.edu. That's parents plural @tulane.edu. I'll also, if you're receiving the parent e-newsletters, there'll be a few more of those coming up before your student graduates, so please continue to pay attention to those. And as I said, please remind your student to be diligent about looking at their Tulane email and make sure that they follow all those things, because they'll probably get emails from the main commencement planning staff as well as their own individual school. They'll probably also get some final information from Newcomb Tulane College as well, so they need to pay attention to all of that. And email is the way they will get their tickets to wave goodbye.
Yes.
Right? So that's very, very important.
And I don't know if I said this out loud earlier, if I just thought it, but it's really important for your students to get into the system early and not wait till the last minute, because if they have any problems, Either, we don't have them on the appropriate list for graduating students' records, and so we haven't allotted them tickets. We need to know that earlier so that we can address those issues. And if your student waits till the day of the event to do that, it makes it a lot harder for us to help them.
So typically, how many days before Wave Goodbye do you usually send them that message?
2 weeks.
2 weeks. Yeah, so they should definitely be thinking about that. And that'll be right when they're taking final exams or getting ready to take finals. So it is a lot for them to think about. And so we do, they get a lot of reminders, but it doesn't hurt, that about these things too, so that you can kind of help keep everything on track. We certainly want you to enjoy this visit and feel like you can navigate your way through the weekend and enjoy being in New Orleans and being on campus and having this wonderful time to celebrate this milestone with your student and your family and friends. And all of us here at Tulane want to support you in doing that. So we hope you'll have a great time. I think we're going to end the webinar in just a second. So I'll just say this is your last time to type anything in. Watch for an email from me probably by tomorrow afternoon or Friday morning with the link to the slides and the link to the recording if you want to listen to things again. So thank you very much, everyone. We appreciate you very much. We know that you're the reason that your students are here, and we're very grateful for that. So have a good evening. Good night.